One of the great things I love doing at the manufacturer is working with companies on webinars. We do a lot of webinars, as you know, and they're incredibly popular. They're great sources of information and expertise for manufacturers to benefit from. And one of my favorite ones this last year has been with Jeremy Phelps from SAP. Welcome, Jeremy, to the TM studio.
Thank you, Nick. Pleased to be here.
Jeremy's from SAP, as I say, and you've been running a round table here, doing pretty much the same sort of thing you do with us in the webinars. But your focus has been on the data-driven supply chain. Now, tell us a little bit about what that is and what messages you've been hearing from people at your table.
Thank you, Nick. Well, the interesting thing about it is that it's really been a question that we've been asking. What does data mean to the supply chain practitioners that we have in the exhibition here today? Because it's all very well for us as software provider to have our own point of view, but we wanted to hear really what the industry has. And it's about what data is important, what problems are we trying to solve, why do we need data? Organizations are incredibly data rich, information poor. So what is of value? And that was the objective of some of our roundtables.
What kind of companies were you talking to?
We had a great cross-section. We had aerospace and defense, automotive, we had pharmaceuticals, we had a whole cross-section. We also had very big organizations and very small organizations, so we had a real rich mix of opinions on what was important.
I imagine the problems were very different between a small organization and a big one. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
It's interesting that I was expecting that to be the case. I think the solutions are possibly going to be different, but the problems are very consistent. The first one that we saw both on big organizations and small ones was about the integration of the network, data for the network itself. Let me explain. We've had a small organization, a small steel fabrication. He made product for part of a major program, and when that major program changed, then his business got totally messed around, and he had his business divided up in 4 pieces. He planned those in individual pieces, so each business was planning for catastrophe. If he joined those up and lifted it up a level, he would actually be planning for value. And that integration of that information across that network was important. Another organization, take the other extreme of pharmaceuticals, he wanted to incorporate and integrate data from outside the organization, from the sensing, from all sorts of geographies, to actually start to define what his global supply chain should look like, where to put a factory, where to build a factory. So those strategic decisions. Same sort of problem.
Yeah, okay. I often hear people talking about the connected supply chain, and there's some suspicion, certainly from the lower down the tier 2s, dealing with tier 1s and OEMs. They're saying, well, why, if I'm connected, it means actually people can see what I'm doing. There's much more transparency, and transparency isn't always a good thing. Is that a concern that you've ever heard expressed?
Yes, but it's usually in our demographic, Nick, that expresses that.
By that he means people of more advanced years,
yes,
I think.
Indeed. Well, the point is, the new generation coming through are used to sharing information and that openness and that transparency. Sure, there are issues for compliance, especially in aerospace and defense, where we really have to be mindful about the sensitivity. But there are innovations like blockchain to actually start to deal with that and manage that. But we have to communicate to make sure that we have a lean supply chain, an effective, responsive and agile supply chain. We have to share data, we have to share management information.
It is actually an inevitability, you can't run away from it. You've just got to manage it better.
You do.
What about people involved in this? Because there is, as you've just alluded to, there is a cultural thing here, and leaders have to take their people with them, don't they?
It's really interesting. That has come out a lot over the keynote speakers today as well, about the cultural aspect. And we saw culture coming in from multiple levels in all of the organizations. There was a culture about making sure data is accurate and there's some great integrity and quality behind the data, so it's trusted. If the culture isn't there for that, then it won't evolve, it won't be useful. The other flip side of that is the culture of demanding and using information. Because if no one's using it, nobody's going to maintain it. So it's a cycle. And the other thing was that the culture for actually raising the game for what the business expects, rather than wait for the IT function to give you the capability. It's clear that technology isn't a constraint. The culture of the business needs to pull these opportunities towards it and actually identify what is of value, and that is of key importance.
You like to talk about the top floor to shop floor approach, don't you?
Absolutely. That was one of the key things. We talked right at the beginning about planning the network, bringing in that horizontal end-to-end and program planning, but it's equally as important top floor, shop floor. And what I mean by that is that around the exhibition there is some fantastic technologies around connecting machine to machine, operator to machine, planning functions, engineering functions to the factory, the manufacturing operations. But then there's the connecting those operations to the so what level above it, which is the management and orchestration of those facilities and resources. And again, on top of that, still the management, the strategic programming of the business, setting the KPIs for the business and making sure that the shop floor can deliver to those. And that connectivity, and the key thing, real-time connectivity, is fundamental. And this is something that the strategic, tactical and operational planning of the network is what drives that supply chain.
It's all incredibly complicated, Jeremy, and I think I'm not a manufacturer, I don't run a company, but I could certainly see why some leaders might be reluctant to get going, reluctant to invest, because it does feel very complex. I'm pretty certain that you would disagree with that point of view.
Yes, it was enlightening really in terms of why people were perhaps still asking very basic questions and still making basic inquiries, and why they haven't moved forward. One of the things that came out to me in the discussions was that a lot of our major organisations in the UK seem to have parent organisations somewhere else, managing their budgets, setting their strategies. And yes, the revolution is happening to them, but the revolution is happening in head office somewhere else. And the organisations in the UK are waiting to hear the ripple effect of what strategy they're being expected to deploy. And what I would say is to our organisations to be the first to use their own data to create the business case, the benefits-driven results for actually getting some investment in this technology now. Don't wait for their parent organisations to tell them what to do. Otherwise you'll evolve an evolution versus revolution.
Yeah, I can actually, that makes such sense, because what it means is that they're going to be slightly behind, and we find ourselves behind others in so many areas, allegedly in productivity. I don't entirely buy that, and investment definitely. But this is a very good example of why perhaps people need, as I've been saying a lot over the last few days, take control of their own destiny and their data as well.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Jeremy Phelps from SAP, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick.